Hello there, I'm Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. It's time to make my youngest grandchild his own book tote. I'm going to be using this bag that I already have, that I was given at a quilt walk, and reconstruct it with fun kid fabric. For this bag, I wanted to use as much variety of fun, kid-friendly fabric as I had in my stash. I got all those fabrics that I thought would be fun and set those aside. Next, I took a piece of a blue floral print that I had gotten at a thrift store not too long ago, and I thought that was going to be big enough to make the lining of this little tote. This tote was sewed with 2 side seams, and that's it. So what I'm going to do is pick out the seams of these 2 side seams. Then I'm going to have a nice flat open surface to make a quilt sandwich. Next, I cut out a piece of scrap batting that was the right size to make this quilt sandwich. Next, I pressed the piece of fabric that I was going to use for my lining. Now, in case you try something like this, I wanted to point out the way they stitch these seams together, there's a little fold on that nylon fabric. I cannot iron that nylon fabric or it will melt. So I'm going to carefully pin my lining to that folded fabric, making sure it's open when I pin it. But wait, I noticed this batting was overhanging and I decided to trim that batting down so it is narrower than my bag. This way I won't have excess bulk in my seams. For the handle sides of this bag, I folded the lining fabric under so I'd have a nice finished edge. Next, I stitched all the way around the outside of the bag to hold everything in place. With that done, I'm ready to start working on the outside of this bag. I started cutting out pieces of fabric that I thought would look cute on this bag, and you'll notice I'm not cutting them to any particular size. There are going to be lots of different sizes of fabric. I'm going to zip on through this cutting. You will definitely get a closer look at all these fabrics. What I have decided to do for this bag is to press under 2 to 3 sides of my little fabric pieces and just pin them into place. I slowed this down a little bit so you can get a better look at what I'm doing. I pinned the first piece into place and I have folded under edges so I won't have raw edges, and then the next piece I can tuck under a folded under edge. So it's just like putting a little puzzle together where no pieces are the same. I pressed under edges that would show, and I tucked under other pressed edges to hide raw edges. When I get everything pinned into place, I will be top stitch quilting this entire bag. At the very bottom of the bag, there is an opening. I've got everything going directional. What I did was I took a piece of 2.5-inch black fabric. I pressed over the edges to make finished edges, pinned that into place at the bottom of this tote. I'm going to do almost the same thing for the top of the bag, front and back where the handles are, to cover up those raw edges. I press the fabric in on itself to make a narrow strip of black fabric with finished edges. Top stitching that black fabric to the top of the front and the back of the bag was my first step. I quilted straight lines to hold this black trim fabric in place. Next, I stitched straight lines on the bottom of the bag where I had placed and pinned into place that black fabric. Once I had the black fabric stitched down, I swapped out my top thread for gray, and I started using a serpentine stitch to stitch all these fabrics down to the bag. I've got black thread in my bobbin, so it kind of gives it an interesting look. You can see the gray, but you can kind of see those little pops of black thread too, and I like that. I continued stitching the serpentine stitch across the bag at regular intervals. I left my stitch display showing here on the right of your screen. There were some of the finished edges that did not get encased in my serpentine stitches, and then I would switch to a zigzag stitch and make sure those edges were tacked down well. Here you can see a close-up of the stitching I've done on this bag. Now it is time to trim the sides. I'm using a horizontal line on my ruler to line up with the teal edge of the top of the bag, and then I'm also lining up with the teal edge of that bag on the right-hand side. Now all I have to do is fold this bag in half, right sides together, and stitch up those side seams. I clipped both sides of this bag, making sure the top edges were lined up. I didn't get to film this, but I stitched a straight stitch first, and then I stitched a blanket stitch to cover up the raw edges as much as possible. So here you see how that looks after I did the stitching. Then it was simply a matter of turning this bag right side out, using my wooden tool to poke out the corners, and pressing the bag flat. As I turned the bag right side out, there was about a 4-inch section on the edge of one side that had a little bit of raw edge showing. Well, I did not have to take the bag apart because I was able to just slide it under the needle, and I went over it with a zigzag stitch twice and got that tacked down. Here is a look at the finished tote front and back. I think this turned out so cute, and gosh, it was really easy to do, just pinning everything into place and top stitching. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.